was one of those nights where everything seemed to stretch on forever. The kind where the darkness on the highway felt suffocating, with nothing but the faint hum of my car's engine and the endless yellow dashes of the road to keep me company. I had been driving for hours after a grueling week of meetings and presentations in a town I was glad to leave behind. It was late, far past midnight, creeping toward 2 a.m. The glow of my headlights illuminated only the road directly in front of me, and the vast emptiness of the highway around me seemed endless. There wasn't another car in sight. The night was cold, colder than it should have been for early autumn, and the rain had just started, tapping lightly on the windshield in a steady rhythm that threatened to lull me into a drowsy state. I turned up the radio, hoping to stay awake, but even that felt like a losing battle. My body ached from sitting too long, and my eyelids felt heavy, begging me to pull over and rest. But I wanted to get home. I needed to get home. That's when I saw him. At first, he was just a shadow on the side of the road, barely noticeable in the dim light, standing near the shoulder, a figure just standing there motionless. My initial instinct was to ignore it and drive on, but as I got closer, I realized he was holding out his thumb, hitchhiking. I hesitated, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. There was something about him that made me uneasy, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it was just the late hour, or maybe it was the fact that I hadn't seen another soul on this road for miles. The rational part of me wanted to keep going. Who picks up hitchhikers at 2 a.m., especially out here in the middle of nowhere? But then another thought crept into my mind. What if he's in trouble? What if his car broke down? It was freezing outside, and the rain was picking up. I imagined myself in his situation, stranded in the middle of the night, desperate for help, and guilt gnawed at me. After a few more seconds of internal debate, I decided to pull over. Just for a few miles, I told myself. I'd drop him off at the nearest town, and that would be it. I slowed down, rolling my car to a stop a few feet ahead of him. I glanced in the rearview mirror, watching as he approached the car slowly. His face was obscured by the hood of his jacket, and he walked with a slight limp. I couldn't shake the unease that washed over me, but I convinced myself that I was just being paranoid. I unlocked the passenger door, and he opened it without saying a word, sliding into the seat beside me. "Where you headed?" I asked, trying to break the tension. He didn't respond immediately. He just sat there, staring straight ahead, his hands resting on his lap. His jacket was soaked from the rain, and he smelled faintly of wet leaves and something else, something I couldn't quite place. After a long, uncomfortable pause, he finally turned his head slightly and said in a low-voiced tone, "That was it. Just one word." I cleared my throat, trying to keep the conversation going. "Well, I'm heading that way. Shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. Just sit tight." He didn't respond, didn't even look at me. The silence in the car was deafening. I focused on the road, but every few seconds, I found myself glancing at him out of the corner of my eye. Something about the way he sat there, so still, so quiet, made my skin crawl. He didn't fidget, didn't shift in his seat like most people would. He just sat. After a few miles, I tried again. "You from around here?" I asked, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the confined space of the car. This time, he didn't even acknowledge that I'd spoken. His head was turned slightly toward the window, but I could tell he wasn't looking at the passing trees or the rain-slicked road. He was just staring. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. The rain was coming down harder now, the rhythmic thud of the droplets on the roof of the car the only sound between us. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white. Something about this wasn't right. The unease I'd felt earlier had blossomed into full-blown dread. My mind raced, trying to come up with a reason to pull over, to end this ride before it got any stranger. But then I glanced at him again, and that's when I saw it. His hands, resting on his lap, were covered in something dark. At first, I thought it was mud, maybe from where he'd fallen or stumbled before I picked him up. But the more I looked, the more I realized that it wasn't mud. It was something thicker, Something darker. My stomach churned as the realization hit me. It was blood. His fingers were stained with it. The dark red smears caked under his fingernails and on the backs of his hands. I felt my heart rate spike, adrenaline flooding my veins. What the hell had I just gotten myself into? I tried to stay calm, not wanting to alert him to the fact that I'd noticed, but panic was clawing at the edges of my mind. I needed to get out of this. Now, I eased my foot off the gas, pretending I was checking something on the dashboard. I think there's something wrong with the engine, I lied, my voice shaky. I'm just going to pull over for a minute and take a look. He didn't respond. He just sat there, motionless, staring out the window. I pulled the car onto the shoulder, the tires crunching on the gravel. My hands were trembling as I put the car in park. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to get as far away from this man as possible. I unbuckled my seat belt slowly, trying not to draw attention to myself. "I'll be right back," I said, forcing a casual tone as I opened the door. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, and for a brief moment, I was paralyzed by indecision. What if he followed me? What if he had a weapon? But then I heard it, the faint sound of the passenger door opening behind me. I didn't wait to find out what he was going to do. I bolted, sprinting toward the tree line on the side of the road. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came in short, panicked gasps. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through my clothes as I ran blindly into the woods, the branches slapping against my face and arms. Behind me, I could hear footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps, following me into the darkness. I didn't dare look back. I just kept running, my legs burning with the effort, my lungs screaming for air. The footsteps were getting closer. I could hear his breathing now, ragged and uneven, like he was struggling to keep up but wouldn't stop. No matter how fast I ran, he was right there, just a few steps behind me. Then, up ahead, I saw it. A small clearing in the trees, the moonlight breaking through the clouds just enough to illuminate a narrow dirt road. I pushed myself harder, breaking through the tree line and stumbling onto the road. I glanced behind me just for a second and saw him emerging from the trees, his hood still up, his face hidden in shadow. He was walking now, slowly, deliberately, as if he knew I had nowhere to go. I turned and ran again, following the road, praying it would lead me somewhere safe. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw it. The faint glow of headlights in the distance, coming toward me. Relief flooded through me. I was going to make it, but then the car stopped, and my heart sank. It wasn't a stranger coming to my rescue. It was the same car I had left on the side of the road, and the man was standing beside it, smiling. I collapsed to my knees, the realization hitting me like a freight train. There was no escaping him. There never had been.